She knew before the test confirmed it. It was there, in the quiet, in the way her hands wouldn't stay steady over something as small as a plastic stick. Ava had negotiated hostile acquisitions without blinking. She had stood in rooms full of men twice her age and made them lower their voices. But this made her sit down on the cold tile floor. She didn't cry. She pressed her palm flat against her stomach as if she could quiet something that hadn't even begun to move yet. One night. One night. One mistake. No, not a mistake. That was the problem. When she closed her eyes, she didn't feel shame first. She felt him. And that complicated everything. She left the test on the bathroom counter and walked out of the room as if distance could blur the lines. It didn't. The apartment felt too quiet. The kind of quiet that presses against the ears. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city below, steel and glass and morning traffic beginning to crawl, but none of it felt connected to her. She wrapped her arms around herself without thinking, not from cold, from containment. Her mind tried to do what it always did. Assess, categorize, act. Timeline first. She counted back carefully. The product launch dinner, the investors flying in from Chicago, the late night after everyone had left. One more drink neither of them needed. Noah standing by the balcony door, jacket off, sleeves pushed up in that careless way he never noticed. He had been laughing at something she said. She couldn't even remember what it was now, only that the laugh softened his face. He didn't laugh like someone trying to impress. He laughed like someone surprised to be allowed to. That had undone her. It hadn't been reckless. It hadn't felt impulsive. It felt overdue. Months of careful professionalism dissolving in one quiet moment when neither of them stepped back. She pressed her fingertips to her temples. This was not about desire anymore. This was biology. Risk. Exposure. She walked back into the bathroom. 2 lines. Clear. No confusion. Her throat tightened, but she swallowed it down. Ava Reynolds did not unravel over information. She used information. She reached for her phone on the counter, then stopped. There was no one she could call yet. Not legal. Not PR. Not even her assistant. Especially not Noah. The thought of his name sent something uneven through her chest. He worked 2 floors below her. Senior software architect. Hired 3 years ago. Brilliant. Quiet. Left exactly at 5:30 every day to pick up his son from daycare. Never stayed for the after-hours networking. Never angled for attention. Widowed. She had read that detail in his HR file during an executive review. She hadn't meant to linger on it, but she did. Car accident. 2 years before he joined the company, she remembered how still he looked in meetings, as if part of him had learned not to move too quickly in the world. And that night, he hadn't been still. She closed her eyes briefly. This was not about romance. That word felt too soft, too young. This was about consequences. Her calendar buzzed in her mind like an alarm. 9 a.m. executive briefing. 10:30 investor call. Lunch with the board chair. Life was already moving forward without waiting for her. She straightened her shoulders. She'd been trained for pressure. Years of proving she could carry more weight than anyone expected. Years of choosing ambition over everything else. She moved through her apartment mechanically. Shower. Black suit. Minimal makeup. Hair pulled back. Every motion precise. When she stepped into the elevator of her building, she caught her reflection in the mirrored wall. Nothing had changed visibly. Same sharp posture. Same steady eyes. Except she knew. That knowledge sat low in her body. Quiet. Immovable. In the car ride to the office, she watched traffic instead of answering emails. She tried to imagine the next weeks. Option 1. Terminate the pregnancy. Discreet. Efficient. Quiet. The scandal evaporates before it begins. The thought made her stomach twist, not from guilt, from resistance. Option 2. Tell no one until necessary. Continue as usual. Manage optics. Prepare contingency plans. Option 3. She didn't finish the list. The building lobby greeted her with its usual blend of polish and anticipation. Staff nodded as she passed. A few offered quick updates. She responded automatically. Calm, controlled. Inside the executive conference room, glass walls overlooked the city skyline. The team was already seated. Charts glowed on screens, numbers, forecasts, projections. She sat at the head of the table. As the CFO began outlining quarterly growth, she forced herself to focus. She asked questions, challenged assumptions, requested clearer data on cost overruns. Her voice did not shake, but there were moments, small ones, when her attention slipped. She imagined a different room, a doctor's office. The smell of antiseptic, the sound of her own heartbeat amplified. She adjusted in her chair. Halfway through the meeting, someone made a comment about long-term sustainability. The word landed strangely. Long-term. Her hand drifted briefly to her abdomen beneath the table. No one noticed. The gesture was small, almost unconscious. By the time the meeting ended, she felt tired in a way she wasn't used to. Not mental fatigue, something deeper. As she stepped into the hallway, she saw him. Noah was walking toward the elevators, laptop tucked under his arm, his tie slightly loosened, like always by mid-morning. He looked up when he sensed her presence. There it was, again that pause. That fraction of a second where something unspoken moved between them. They hadn't discussed that night beyond a brief, careful conversation the next morning. Mutual agreement. It happened. It stays between us. We continue professionally. He had been respectful. Steady. No regret in his eyes, but no demand either. Morning, he said quietly. His voice always carried a low warmth. Not loud, not hesitant. Just grounded. Good morning, she replied. She searched his face for something she wasn't sure what. Clues. Changes. Signs that he felt different too. He looked the same. Composed. Capable. And suddenly the secret felt larger. Not abstract. Personal. She wondered for one reckless second what his expression would be if she told him right there in the hallway. You're going to be a father again. The thought made her chest tighten. But this wasn't only his news. Not yet. She needed time to understand her own position before bringing him into it. How's the new build? She asked, defaulting to work. Stable so far. We fixed the security patch overnight, he said. His eyes held hers a second longer than necessary. You look tired. The comment was simple, not intrusive. But it landed. I'm fine, she said, perhaps too quickly. He didn't push. That was one of the things that unsettled her most about him. He didn't chase, didn't press. He waited, as if he understood that people revealed themselves when ready. They stepped into the elevator together. The doors slid closed. The space felt smaller than usual. Silence stretched. She became aware of his proximity, the faint scent of clean soap, the steady rhythm of his breathing. Her heart beat harder than it should have. She wondered if he could feel the shift in her, if he sensed the invisible line that now connected them in a way neither had planned. When the elevator stopped at his floor, he hesitated before stepping out. Ava, he said quietly. She looked at him. If anything about that night complicates things for you professionally, I need to know. He wasn't asking for reassurance. He was offering responsibility. The doors began to close. It doesn't, she said. The words tasted incomplete. The doors sealed shut between them. As the elevator continued upward, she exhaled slowly. Her reflection stared back at her again. It was no longer just her reputation at stake, not just corporate governance or shareholder trust. It was a child. His child. The realization settled fully for the first time. And for a brief, unexpected moment beneath the fear, beneath the calculations, there was something else. Not panic. Something softer. Quieter. It frightened her more than the scandal ever could. She didn't return to her office right away. Instead, she walked past it, past the assistant's desk, past the framed awards and the company timeline mounted along the corridor like a polished memory of constant upward motion. She needed a minute where no one expected anything from her. The stairwell door closed behind her with a heavy click. The air inside was cooler, untouched by perfume or coffee or conversation, just concrete and echo. She sat down on the step between floors, not gracefully, just Down. Her heels made a sharp sound against the cement. She slipped them off. For a long moment, she stared at her hands. They were steady again. That irritated her. She had built a life around steadiness, around the ability to make hard calls without flinching. Layoffs, acquisitions, strategic exits. She could look someone in the eye and tell them their division no longer existed. But this wasn't a division. Her mind kept circling the same question. Not dramatically, not desperately, just persistently. What kind of person does she want to be when this becomes visible? She leaned her head back against the wall. Termination would be simple, efficient, private. She could schedule it under a routine medical leave. The board would never know. The press would never sniff around. Noah would never have to carry this weight again. She imagined telling him that instead. It's handled. His face, she tried to picture it. Would he nod, accept it because it was easier? Or would something in him close again, the way grief closes people? She inhaled slowly. She had read enough about grief to recognize its marks. Noah carried it in the careful way he lived. No unnecessary risks. No wasted time. Every decision filtered to the quiet responsibility of raising a child alone. Ethan, 6 years old. She had learned his name accidentally during a team dinner months ago, when someone asked Noah why he couldn't stay late. "My son has a school thing," he had said simply. No apology, just fact. She stood up abruptly. Sitting here wasn't solving anything. Back in her office, she closed the door and finally allowed herself to look at her calendar for the next few months. Conferences, investor roadshows, a keynote in Berlin. She imagined being visibly pregnant in those rooms. The thought sent a flicker of something sharp through her. Not fear, exactly. Exposure. The media already watched her closely. Female CEO under 40. Strategic force. Relentless. Disciplined. None of those headlines had room for softness. Her hand drifted again to her abdomen. The gesture was becoming instinctive. She wasn't naive. There would be whispers, questions about judgment, about boundaries, about power imbalance. She pressed her lips together. Noah had never leveraged his position, never flirted publicly, never blurred lines at work. That night it unfolded between equals, even if their titles said otherwise. But perception did not care about nuance. Her email pinged, a message from her board chair requesting a brief one-on-one before lunch. Routine. Probably about expansion strategy. She stared at the notification longer than necessary. At some point, she would have to decide whether this child entered a world protected by secrecy or defended by honesty. The afternoon moved with mechanical precision. She answered questions, signed documents, approved budgets. Her voice remained calm, but she caught herself drifting again during a pause in conversation, imagining a small hand wrapped around her finger, imagining the disruption of her immaculate apartment. Toys on the floor, crumbs on the kitchen counter. Her life was controlled down to the minute. She owned very little that wasn't intentional. A child would not ask permission before changing that. The board chair meeting ended without incident. No hidden crises, no sudden threats, which made the quiet inside her feel louder. By 5:30, the office began to thin out. Assistants packing up, analysts shutting down monitors. She stayed seated at her desk long after the hallway emptied. Finally, she reached for her phone. Her thumb hovered over Noah's name. She didn't call. Instead, she sent a single message. "Can you stay a few minutes after everyone leaves?" The reply came almost immediately. Yes. No question mark. No hesitation. She stood and smoothed her jacket unnecessarily. When the building had mostly emptied, she walked down to the engineering floor. The lights were dimmer here in the evenings. Less polished, more functional. Noah's office door was half open. He was seated at his desk, reviewing something on his screen. He looked up when she knocked softly against the frame. His expression shifted, alert, but not alarmed. "You said you needed a few minutes," he said. She stepped inside and closed the door. The air felt different in this room, less corporate. There was a small drawing taped to the wall beside his desk. Stick figures. A house. A crooked sun in the corner. Ethan's work, probably. She focused on Noah instead, He stood, giving her the chair without being asked. She remained standing. This wasn't a meeting. There's something you need to know, she said. Her voice was steady. Too steady. He waited. She noticed the faint lines at the corners of his eyes, the way he braced slightly, as if preparing for impact. She respected that about him. He didn't hide from hard things. I'm pregnant. The words didn't echo. They just existed between them. For a second, his face didn't change at all. Then the color drained slightly. Not shock, exactly. Processing. He sat back down slowly. Silence filled the room. Not hostile. Just heavy. How far? He asked quietly. Early, she replied. Very. He nodded once. His gaze dropped briefly to her midsection, then back to her eyes. Not assessing. Not calculating. Just acknowledging. She felt something inside her unclench at that. I haven't decided anything, she added. That wasn't entirely true. But she needed him to understand that she wasn't presenting a finished plan. He exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair. I didn't expect this, he said. Neither did I, she almost replied, but she stayed quiet. He leaned forward, forearms resting on his knees. Are you okay? The question was simple, not strategic. She searched herself for an answer that wasn't automatic. I don't know yet, she said. That felt honest. He nodded again. Another stretch of silence. I'm not going to disappear, he said finally. The statement landed with quiet weight. She hadn't realized until that moment that a small, guarded part of her had feared exactly that. Not because of his character, because of history, because people leave when things get complicated. Her shoulders eased slightly. There are risks, she said, for the company, for you. I know. If this becomes public, it will, he interrupted gently. Not defiant, just realistic. She studied him. You understand what that could cost you? She asked. He gave a faint, almost tired smile. I've already lost the worst thing once, he said. Reputation isn't the same category. The room went very still. She felt the depth of that statement without him needing to explain it. And Ethan? She asked carefully. At his son's name, something shifted in his expression. Protective. Thoughtful. He'll ask questions, Noah said. But he's wanted a sibling since he learned what they were. The corner of his mouth lifted briefly, then settled. Ava felt an unexpected warmth spread through her chest at the image. This wasn't a crisis to him. It was possibility. That realization unsettled her in a different way. I won't pressure you, he said. Whatever you decide, I'll respect it. She believed him. And that made the decision feel heavier, not lighter. She moved toward the door, needing space again. When she reached for the handle, he spoke once more. Ava. She turned. You don't have to carry this alone. The words were quiet. No grand declaration, just an offer. For the first time that day, she felt the edge of something close to tears, not because she was overwhelmed, but because she wasn't. Because instead of panic, there was steadiness. She opened the door. We'll talk more soon, she said. As she walked back through the dim hallway, she noticed her steps felt different. Not slower, just more aware. Outside, the evening air carried the faint smell of rain. The city lights flicker on one by one. She paused on the sidewalk before heading to her car. The future was still uncertain, the scandals still possible, the consequences still real. But beneath all of that, something else had taken root. Not ambition, not fear. Choice, and she realized, standing there with the hum of traffic around her, that she had already made it. The next morning, she woke before her alarm. It wasn't unusual. She'd been doing that for years, but this time she didn't get out of bed immediately. She lay still, staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet hum of the city through the glass. Her hand moved again, without thinking, flat against her stomach. Nothing to feel yet, nothing to confirm, just skin and bone and the faint warmth of her own body. She didn't know what she was hoping for. A sign, a certainty. Instead, there was only the weight of knowing, When she arrived at the office, everything looked the same. The lobby, the security desk, the polished stone floors that always made footsteps sound sharper than they needed to. People smiled at her, said good morning, asked if she'd reviewed the latest investor deck. She answered smoothly, nodded, kept walking. It was unsettling how quickly the world continued. In her office, she poured coffee and immediately regretted it. The smell hit her wrong. Too bitter, too thick. She set the mug down untouched and opened her laptop. There were emails waiting, a legal update, a procurement dispute, a request from HR about new hiring guidelines. She read each one carefully, responded with her usual efficiency. It was almost comforting, the familiarity of it. Words on a screen were manageable. Negotiations were manageable. Conflict had rules. Her body did not. At 9:30, she had a meeting with the HR director. It had been scheduled weeks ago, a quarterly review. Ava sat through it with her hands folded neatly on the table, listening to the presentation on retention rates and employee satisfaction scores. She nodded at the right moments. But when the HR director mentioned workplace relationships as part of a compliance update, Ava felt her throat tighten. She kept her face neutral. The HR director continued speaking, unaware. A slide came up listing conflict of interest policies, reporting requirements, disciplinary actions. Ava's eyes stayed on the screen. Her mind moved faster than the conversation. If she disclosed her pregnancy, she would be forced into questions she couldn't control. There would be investigations, legal reviews. The board would demand a risk assessment. And though she thought of him sitting in that small engineering office, looking at her with steady eyes and telling her he wouldn't disappear. If this became a corporate matter, it would stop being human. It would become a liability. When the meeting ended, she walked back to her office and shut the door behind her harder than she meant to. She stood there for a moment, breathing slowly, as if she'd been running. She reached for her phone again. This time, she called her doctor's office. The receptionist's voice was cheerful, practiced. Ava gave her name, spoke in clipped sentences, and scheduled an appointment for the earliest available slot. Friday morning, 3 days away. When she hung up, her hands felt cold. She turned her chair toward the window and stared out at the skyline. The city looked indifferent, the same way it always did. People moving in every direction, lives intersecting without anyone noticing. Her life had always been something she could explain in numbers. Performance, growth, strategy. Now it was something she couldn't explain at all. Around noon, she found herself walking down to the cafeteria without realizing it. She rarely ate there. Too many conversations. Too many eyes. But today, her stomach felt hollow, not hungry, exactly just unsettled. She picked up a salad she didn't want and a bottle of water, paid without looking at the cashier. Found a table near the back. She was halfway through pushing lettuce around with her fork when she saw Noah. He was standing in line, holding a tray with a sandwich and a small carton of milk. He looked tired, like he hadn't slept much. His posture was the same, but there was a heaviness in his shoulders she hadn't noticed before. He turned his head slightly, scanning the room. When he saw her, his expression tightened for a second. Then he walked over. "Can I?" he asked quietly, gesturing to the chair. "Yes," she said. He sat down slowly, like he wasn't sure if the floor would shift beneath him. For a moment, neither of them spoke. They were surrounded by people, but the table felt isolated, like the noise around them was muffled. Noah unwrapped his sandwich, took a bite, then stopped chewing. "You didn't eat your coffee," he said softly. It was almost a joke. Almost. She stared at her water bottle. "I can't stand the smell today," she admitted. He nodded. His eyes flicked briefly to her stomach, then away. He wasn't staring. He wasn't claiming anything. He just looked, aware. "I've been thinking," he said. She waited. "I should talk to my lawyer," he continued. "Not for anything aggressive, just to understand. Custody, support, rights, all of it." The words were practical, but his voice wasn't cold. He was careful. Ava's chest tightened again, not because he was wrong, because it made it real. Do what you need to, she said. He studied her face for a moment. You're not angry? Why would I be? She asked, though her tone came out sharper than intended. Noah's jaw moved slightly, like he was weighing his words. Because it turns into paperwork, he said, and paperwork is how people avoid being human. That hit her harder than she expected. She looked down at her fork. I'm trying not to lose control, she said quietly. Noah didn't respond right away. He took another bite of his sandwich, chewed slowly. Then he said, You never had control over this. Ava's eyes lifted to him. He wasn't criticizing her. He was stating a fact. Something in her wanted to push back, to defend herself, to say she had always had control, that she had earned it, built it, protected it with discipline. But the words didn't come. Because he was right. She felt exposed in a way she wasn't used to. Across the cafeteria, two junior managers walked past their table and glanced at them. Ava noticed immediately. It was instinct. One glance. 1 second too long. Then, they kept walking, but the air shifted. Noah noticed too. His gaze followed them briefly, then returned to her. It's already starting, he murmured. Ava's grip tightened on the water bottle. No, she said, but her voice didn't sound convincing. Noah leaned forward slightly. I'm not scared of gossip, he said. But you should know. People talk when they don't understand something. Ava swallowed. They don't need to understand, she said. He gave a faint nod, but his expression stayed serious. They'll try anyway, he replied. They sat in silence again. Ava's mind ran through the office like a surveillance camera. Who had seen them together lately? Who knew about that night? Who had noticed Noah staying late on the engineering floor? No one. She had been careful. But careful wasn't the same as invisible. When Noah stood to leave, he hesitated. Friday, he said quietly. Your appointment? She blinked. She hadn't told him. Then she realized she must have spoken it aloud the night before without remembering. Yes, she said. Noah nodded once. If you want me there, I'll come, he said. Ava's throat tightened. She didn't answer right away. She couldn't, because part of her wanted to say yes immediately. The other part of her wanted to keep him at a distance, to protect both of them. In the end, she only said, I'll let you know. He didn't look offended. He just nodded again, accepting it. When he walked away, Ava stayed seated, staring at the untouched salad. The room felt louder now. She realized something then, something she hadn't allowed herself to consider fully. This wasn't just about her being pregnant. It was about her being seen. That afternoon, she sat through 2 calls she barely remembered. Her voice worked fine, her brain didn't. She kept drifting back to the cafeteria, to that one glance from the managers who walked past, to the subtle change in the air when Noah sat down with her. She had always understood power. She had never understood how fragile it could be. When the last call ended, she closed her laptop and stared at the dark screen for a long time. Her reflection looked sharper than she felt. There was a knock at the door. Her assistant stepped in carefully. Ms. Reynolds, your 6 o'clock canceled. Should I move tomorrow's client meeting earlier? Ava nodded. Yes. Thank you. The assistant hesitated, then left. Ava stayed seated. She should have gone home. She should have rested. But she didn't want the quiet of her apartment. Quiet made room for thoughts. At 7, she finally left. The garage smelled faintly of oil and concrete. She walked to her car, unlocked it, and sat behind the wheel without starting the engine. Her hands rested on the steering wheel. She thought of her mother, of all people. Not because they were close, they weren't. They spoke on holidays, occasionally on birthdays, polite conversations with too many pauses. Her mother had always been a woman who believed in appearances. Not vanity exactly, more like survival. Ava had learned early that certain truths were dangerous if spoken aloud. Ava's mother used to say, people don't forgive women for being human. Ava had hated her for that sentence when she was younger. Hated the bitterness in it, the resignation. Now, sitting alone in the dark garage, she felt the sentence settle into her bones like something familiar. She started the car and drove home. The next 2 days passed in a strange blur. Ava avoided Noah as much as she could without making it obvious. She didn't call him to her office. She didn't wander near engineering. She kept her focus on work, on board updates, on the Berlin keynote draft. But even when she didn't see him, she felt him in the building, like an invisible thread stretched between them. By Thursday evening she was exhausted. Not physically, not yet, but mentally, like she had been holding her breath for days. She went to bed early and woke before dawn. Friday, her appointment was at 8:30. She dressed in simple black slacks and a gray coat. No heels. She couldn't explain why, but heels felt wrong for this. Outside, the air was damp. The sky was low and pale, as if the sun hadn't decided whether to show up. Her driver offered to take her. She refused. She needed to feel like she still owned her own movements. She drove herself. The clinic was private, discreet, the kind of place executives used because no one asked questions. The parking lot was nearly empty. Ava sat in the car for a moment, fingers resting on the gear shift, watching the building. She checked her phone. No new messages. She hadn't told Noah she was going. She had wanted to. She had typed out a message 3 times and deleted it every time. Something about inviting him in felt like crossing a line she couldn't uncross. But as she stepped into the waiting room, she realized the truth. The line had already been crossed. The receptionist greeted her politely. Ava gave her name. The woman didn't react. No flicker of recognition. No hint of judgment. Ava sat down in a corner chair. The waiting room smelled like clean air and lavender. There were magazines on a table she didn't touch. A small fountain in the corner trickled water in a way that felt forced, like someone had decided silence needed to be softened. Her leg bounced once before she forced it still. A woman across the room looked about 20, wearing a hoodie, her face pale. A man sat beside her, staring at the floor. Ava wondered if they were here for the same reason. She wondered if they looked at her and knew, or if she looked like what she always looked like, someone who had everything under control. Her phone buzzed. A text from Noah. "Are you there?" Ava's throat tightened. She stared at the screen. She hadn't told him the clinic name. She hadn't told him the time. Her fingers hovered. Before she could respond, another message appeared. "I'm outside. If you don't want me to come in, I won't." Ava's chest felt too tight to breathe properly. She typed back slowly, "Come in." She didn't add anything else. A minute later, the door opened and Noah walked in. He wasn't wearing a suit, just dark jeans and a coat. His hair was slightly damp from the mist outside. He looked out of place in the clean waiting room, like someone who didn't belong in quiet spaces meant for decisions. His eyes found hers immediately. He walked over without hesitation. Ava stood, then realized she didn't need to. She sat back down, suddenly aware of how unsteady she felt. Noah sat beside her. Not too close. Close enough. He didn't speak at first. His presence changed the air around her. The loneliness eased, just slightly. "You didn't tell me," he said quietly. "I didn't know if I wanted you here," Ava admitted. Noah nodded once. "That makes sense." He looked around the room, then back at her. "How are you feeling?" he asked. Ava's lips pressed together. She could have said fine. She could have lied. Instead, she said, "Like I'm about to walk into something that will change everything." Noah's gaze softened. "It will," he said, "but you don't have to pretend you're not scared." Ava's eyes stung, but she didn't let the tears fall. She blinked once, hard, and looked away. A nurse called her name. Ava stood immediately. Noah stood too. The nurse glanced at him. "Is he coming?" Ava hesitated for half a second. Then she said, "Yes." Noah's expression didn't change, but she saw the slight tightening in his jaw, like he was holding himself together too. They followed the nurse down a hallway that smelled like antiseptic and something faintly sweet. The exam room was small and bright. Ava sat on the paper-covered bed, staring at the sterile instruments on the counter. Noah stood near the wall, hands in his pockets. The doctor entered with a calm smile, introduced herself, asked routine questions. Ava answered smoothly. "Last cycle. Any medical history?" Any symptoms? The doctor didn't rush. She explained what would happen, offered options, asked if Ava wanted to hear the heartbeat when they got there. Ava froze at that. She hadn't considered a heartbeat yet. The idea made her stomach twist. Noah's eyes flicked toward her. Ava swallowed. "Yes," she said quietly. The doctor nodded and left briefly. When they were alone again, Noah stepped closer. "You don't have to do anything you don't want," he said. Ava let out a slow breath. "I know." She didn't look at him. She didn't trust her face. Noah stayed beside her, silent, not filling the space with reassurance, just there. The doctor returned with the ultrasound technician. Ava lay back when asked, staring at the ceiling tiles. Cold gel pressed against her skin. She flinched slightly. Noah's hand hovered near her shoulder, not touching, like he was waiting for permission. Ava didn't ask for comfort. But she didn't pull away either. The screen was turned slightly away at first. The technician moved the wand gently, eyes focused, expression neutral. Ava's breath caught. For a moment, there was nothing but static gray shapes. Then the technician adjusted and something shifted into view. A small, blurred form, barely recognizable. The technician pointed. "There." Ava's eyes locked onto the screen. She didn't speak. Noah stepped closer, leaning in. His face went still, like he was afraid to blink. The room was silent except for the faint hum of the machine. Then the doctor reached for a button, and sound filled the room. A rapid, soft thudding. A heartbeat. Ava's chest tightened so sharply she almost sat up. Her hands gripped the edge of the bed. She stared at the screen, unable to move. She felt Noah's hand finally settle on her shoulder. Light, careful, not claiming her, just grounding her. Ava's eyes burned. She blinked, and one tear slipped out anyway, silent and fast. She hated that it happened. She hated that it felt like relief. The doctor smiled gently. "Everything looks normal. You're about 6 weeks." 6 weeks. Ava repeated the words in her mind as if they were a foreign language. The doctor continued speaking, explaining prenatal care, vitamins, follow-up visits. Ava heard none of it. All she could hear was the echo of that heartbeat. When it was over, Ava sat up slowly, wiping her face quickly before anyone could comment. Noah stayed quiet. The doctor handed Ava paperwork and offered congratulations without making it sound like an assumption. Ava nodded numb. When they stepped back into the hallway, Ava stopped walking. She pressed a hand against the wall, breathing shallowly. Noah turned to her immediately. "Ava," he said softly. She shook her head once like she couldn't handle her name being spoken right now. She stared down at the papers in her hands. It wasn't abstract anymore. It wasn't a possibility. It was real. Noah watched her carefully, then said, "What are you thinking?" Ava's voice came out quieter than she expected. "I can't undo that sound," she said. Noah's eyes stayed on her face. "I know," he replied. Ava swallowed hard. The decision she'd been trying to postpone had already begun to make itself, not through logic, through a heartbeat, through the way her body reacted before her mind could catch up. She looked at Noah then. Really looked. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't celebrating. He looked shaken, like he'd been hit with something heavy. But there was something else there, too. A steadiness. A quiet kind of commitment that didn't need words. Ava realized with sudden clarity that she wasn't afraid of motherhood the way she thought she was. She was afraid of losing the version of herself the world respected, and she wasn't sure she cared as much anymore. After the appointment, they didn't go back to the office. Ava told her assistant she had a personal emergency. The words felt strange leaving her mouth, like a lie, but also like the closest truth she could safely offer. Noah offered to drive her home. She refused at first out of habit. Then she realized she was refusing out of pride. So she let him. They walked to his car in silence. The air outside was colder than it looked, the dampness biting through her coat. Noah opened the passenger door for her. Not dramatically, just automatically, like he'd been doing it for years. Inside, the car smelled faintly of crayons and detergent. The back seat held a booster seat, a small blanket folded neatly beside it. Ava stared at it longer than she meant to. Noah started the engine and pulled out carefully. For several minutes, neither of them spoke. Ava watched the city pass. She noticed things she never paid attention to when she was driving: people waiting at bus stops, a woman walking a dog, a man jogging in the cold with his hood up. Normal lives. It made her feel like she'd been standing outside of something for years without realizing. Noah finally spoke when they stopped at a red light. "I need to tell Ethan," he said. Ava's gaze shifted to him. "Not now," he added quickly. "Not yet. But I can't keep it from him forever." Ava didn't answer immediately. She was trying to picture it, a 6-year-old hearing news like that. A child processing a sibling before he could understand what it meant. "He'll ask who the mother is," Ava said. Noah nodded. Eventually, Ava's jaw tightened. She didn't like the idea of being spoken about in someone else's home, in someone else's life, without her being there. She didn't like feeling out of control, but she also didn't like the thought of Ethan hearing it in a way that felt like shame. Noah turned slightly, eyes on the road. "He's not going to judge you," he said. Ava let out a short breath. "That's not what I'm worried about." Noah glanced at her, then back to the road. "Right," he said quietly. "You're worried about everyone else." She didn't correct him. They reached her apartment building. Noah pulled into the drop-off lane and parked. The engine stayed running. Ava unfastened her seatbelt slowly. Her hands felt clumsy. Noah watched her. "You should eat something," he said. "I don't feel hungry." "I know," he replied. "Still." Ava nodded once, though she knew she probably wouldn't. She opened the door but paused before stepping out. "Noah." He looked up. She didn't know what she wanted to say. "Thank you" felt too small. "I'm scared" felt too exposed. "Don't leave" felt humiliating. So she said the only thing she could: "I'm keeping it." The words hung in the air. Noah didn't speak immediately. His eyes widened slightly, like he'd been bracing for something else. Then his shoulders dropped. A slow exhale. "Okay," he said. But the way he said it wasn't casual. It sounded like relief and fear tangled together. Ava nodded, then stepped out of the car. She shut the door and walked toward the entrance. Halfway there, she turned back. Noah was still sitting behind the wheel, watching her. He lifted a hand slightly, not a wave exactly, just acknowledgement. Ava turned away and went inside. Up in her apartment, she removed her coat and stood in the middle of the living room without moving. Everything looked the same as it had that morning. Clean surfaces, neutral colors, no personal clutter. Her life had always been designed to look like nothing could touch it. Now it felt like a museum. She walked into the kitchen and opened the refrigerator. There was food, technically. Pre-cut fruit, bottled water, expensive yogurt she never finished. She took out a piece of toast and forced herself to eat half of it standing at the counter. The taste was dull. Her stomach tightened anyway. When she was done, she leaned against the counter, one hand resting lightly on her stomach again. It was becoming a habit, a reflex, like her body was reminding her constantly that she wasn't alone inside herself anymore. She didn't know if that comforted her or disturbed her. Her phone buzzed. A message from her board chair. "Need to discuss the Berlin keynote draft today. Can you join a quick call at 3?" Ava stared at it. Berlin. She had been preparing for it for months. It was supposed to be a statement, a proof of dominance in the market. A reminder that her company wasn't just growing, it was leading. Now the thought of standing on a stage in another country, under bright lights with cameras pointed at her, felt like stepping into a trap. She typed back, "Yes." Then she set the phone down and immediately regretted agreeing. But she didn't know how to be any other way. At 3, she sat at her desk in her home office and joined the call. The board chair spoke briskly, discussing messaging strategy, global perception, investor confidence. Ava responded with practiced ease. But her mind kept drifting back to Noah's car, the booster seat, the blanket. She imagined Noah buckling Ethan in after school, asking about his day, listening to stories about spelling tests and playground arguments. A life built on small routines. Ava didn't have routines like that. Her life was built on deadlines. After the call ended, she closed her laptop and rubbed her face with both hands. Her head ached faintly. She wanted to sleep, but she didn't trust herself to rest. Rest meant thinking. So she did what she always did. She worked. Hours passed. By evening, her phone buzzed again. This time it was Noah. "Ethan's with my sister tonight. If you want to talk, I'm free." Ava stared at the message for a long time. She wasn't sure what she wanted to talk about. There was nothing to solve yet. Nothing to negotiate. No plan that could make the situation clean. But the thought of sitting alone in her apartment felt unbearable in a way she couldn't admit. She typed back, "Come over." The reply came immediately. "On my way." Ava stood and walked to the window. She watched the street below, the headlights passing like slow-moving veins of light. When Noah arrived, she let him in without speaking. He stepped inside quietly, as if he sensed the mood of the space. He looked around briefly. Ava realized he had never been here before. That night, the night it happened, had been at a hotel near the conference venue. Neutral ground, a place neither of them owned. Her apartment felt too intimate for what they were now. Noah removed his coat and hung it carefully. He didn't comment on anything. Didn't make small talk. He just stood there, waiting. Ava crossed her arms. "I heard it," she said. Noah's gaze sharpened slightly. "The heartbeat?" She nodded. Noah swallowed. His throat moved like the word was stuck there. "I keep hearing it too," he admitted. They stood in silence for a moment. Ava noticed the way Noah's hands flexed slightly at his sides, like he didn't know what to do with them. He looked nervous. It was strange seeing him that way. At work he was calm, controlled, almost untouchable. Here, he looked like a man standing at the edge of something he didn't know how to step into. Ava walked to the kitchen and poured herself water. She offered him some without asking. He accepted. They sat on the couch, leaving a small distance between them. Ava kept her posture straight, like she was still in a meeting. Noah looked at her hands. "You're doing that a lot," he said quietly. Ava followed his gaze. Her fingers were resting against her stomach again. She pulled her hand away quickly. "I didn't realize," she said. Noah nodded. Then he said, almost hesitantly, "Do you want to know something strange?" Ava looked at him. Noah's voice dropped. "When my wife died, I thought that part of my life was over. Like the universe had decided I didn't get to have anything new." Ava's chest tightened. He didn't say her name. He didn't dramatize it, but the words carried weight. "I built everything around Ethan," he continued. "He was enough. He still is. But I stopped imagining anything beyond him." Ava listened without interrupting. She could feel the seriousness in his voice, like he wasn't offering a story. He was offering a piece of himself. "And now," Noah said, looking down at his glass, "I'm terrified." Ava's throat tightened again. "Because you're not sure you want it?" she asked. Noah's head lifted sharply. "No." The answer came too fast. Too sure. He exhaled, calmer. "I'm terrified because I do want it," he said. "And wanting something again feels dangerous." Ava stared at him. She understood that more than she wanted to. Wanting meant vulnerability. Wanting meant giving someone the power to ruin you. She leaned back slightly, her hands gripping the edge of the couch cushion. "This is going to destroy my image," she said quietly. Noah looked at her, expression steady. "It might," he said, "but your image isn't you." Ava's jaw tightened. She didn't like being challenged, not even gently. Noah continued anyway, voice calm. "I've watched you for years," he said. "Not like a creep, just in meetings, and how people react to you. They're scared of you, Ava." Ava's eyes narrowed slightly. Noah didn't back down. "And you let them be," he said, "because fear keeps things predictable." The words landed too close to the truth. Ava didn't respond. Noah's gaze softened. "I'm not judging you," he said. I'm just saying, maybe this isn't here to ruin you. Maybe it's here to force you to live differently. Ava felt her breath catch. She looked away toward the window, the city lights blurred behind glass. I don't know how to live differently, she admitted. Noah's voice was quiet. I do, he said. Ava turned back to him. He didn't smile. He didn't try to make it romantic. He just looked tired and honest. I've lived with loss, Noah said. And I've lived with loss. And I can tell you the truth. None of the things you're afraid of matter as much as you think they do. Ava stared at him. Something in her chest felt tight, almost painful. Not because he was wrong, because she knew he was right, and she didn't know how to accept it. The silence stretched. Noah shifted slightly closer, not touching her, just nearer. If you want me to be quiet, I will, he said. If you want me to fight for you, I will. If you want me to disappear, I can. Ava's eyes snapped to his. No, she said immediately. The word came out sharp, instinctive. Noah froze. Ava realized what she had revealed. Too much. She swallowed hard and forced her voice to steady. Don't say that, she added, quieter. Not like it's an option. Noah's expression changed. A softness, but also something deeper. Like he'd been waiting to hear that without daring to ask for it. He nodded slowly. Okay, he said. Ava's throat tightened again. She looked down at her hands. They were trembling slightly now. She didn't try to hide it. For once, she didn't have the energy. Noah stayed until late. Not because they were talking the whole time. They weren't. There were long stretches where Ava just sat with her glass of water, staring at the carpet, feeling the silence press in and then loosen again. At some point, she realized she wasn't trying to escape the silence anymore. She was letting it exist. Noah didn't try to fill it. He didn't reach for her. He didn't say the wrong, comforting things people said when they didn't know what else to do. He just sat there, like someone who understood that sometimes the best thing you could offer another person was presence. Around midnight, Ava walked him to the door. He pulled on his coat and hesitated, his hand resting on the doorknob. You should sleep, he said. Ava nodded. I'll try. Noah looked at her a moment longer. Then he said, if you wake up in the middle of the night and you can't breathe, text me. Ava's mouth tightened slightly, almost like she wanted to smile but couldn't. I don't do that, she said. Noah's gaze stayed steady. You might, he replied. Then he left. When the door closed behind him, Ava stood there for a long time listening to the quiet. She expected her apartment to feel empty again. But it didn't. It felt altered. Like someone had stepped into a room she'd kept locked for years and left the door slightly open behind them. She went to bed and stared at the ceiling until her eyes burned. Eventually she slept. The next week was worse. Not because anything happened, because nothing did. No announcements, no dramatic confrontations, no sudden scandal, just the slow grind of daily work layered over the constant awareness of her body. She started noticing small things. Her shirts felt tighter around her chest. Her stomach turned when she smelled certain foods in the cafeteria. Her patience ran thin faster than usual, and her mood, she didn't like thinking about that. She'd always believed emotions were manageable if you treated them like noise, something you could mute. But now, the noise was inside her. On Tuesday morning, she walked into the executive boardroom and stopped short. 2 members of the board were already there, speaking quietly. They fell silent when she entered. Not abruptly, not suspiciously, but enough. Ava smiled politely and took her seat. They continued talking as if nothing had happened. But Ava had built her career on reading rooms. She could feel the tension the way some people felt changes in weather. Someone knew something, or someone suspected. During the meeting, she noticed the general counsel watching her more closely than usual, not staring, just tracking. When Ava spoke, the counsel nodded too quickly, as if trying to appear supportive. Ava's hands stayed folded in front of her, calm, controlled, but her pulse was steady and hard in her throat. After the meeting, she returned to her office and shut the door. She didn't sit down. Instead, she walked to the window and stood there, staring at the city, breathing slowly. Her phone buzzed. A message from Noah. "Can we talk?" Ava stared at it for a long moment. She typed back, "Come up." 5 minutes later, there was a knock. Noah stepped inside and closed the door behind him. His expression was tight. Ava didn't waste time. "What is it?" she asked. Noah exhaled. "Someone from HR asked me yesterday if I wanted to update my emergency contact information." Ava's stomach dropped. "That's normal," she said. Though she already knew it wasn't, Noah shook his head. It wasn't framed as normal. It was framed as convenient. Ava's jaw clenched. She walked to her desk, sat down, and forced herself to breathe evenly. "Did they mention me?" she asked. "No," Noah said. But the way she looked at me, she was fishing. Ava stared at the papers on her desk without seeing them. The company had policies, strict ones, conflict of interest protocols, reporting requirements. If HR suspected something, they wouldn't confront her immediately. They'd gather evidence quietly, prepare a file, and the board would demand action. Ava's mind started building contingency plans automatically. Restructure reporting lines. Move Noah under a different division. Formal disclosure. Legal protections. But all of it felt like trying to wrap a human situation in corporate tape. Noah stepped closer. "Ava," he said, "I think someone saw us at the clinic." Ava's head lifted sharply. Noah's expression didn't soften. "There was a woman in the waiting room," he continued. "Older. She kept looking at you. I didn't think anything of it at the time." Ava's blood ran cold. She remembered the woman. Well-dressed. Quiet. Sitting with her legs crossed, reading a magazine without turning pages. Ava had assumed she was a patient. Or maybe she had been, but patients could still talk. Ava felt her stomach twist. The baby made itself known suddenly, not through movement, but through nausea that rose sharply and forced her to grip the edge of the desk. Noah noticed immediately. "You okay?" he asked. Ava shook her head once, breathing through it. She forced it down with sheer will, the same way she forced everything down. "I'm fine," she said. Noah didn't argue. He just watched her with a look that made her feel too seen. Ava straightened in her chair. "We need to be careful," she said. Noah nodded. "We already are," he replied. Ava's eyes narrowed slightly. "Not careful enough." Noah's jaw tightened. "What do you want me to do?" he asked quietly. "Disappear?" Ava didn't answer. Because the thought had crossed her mind. Not because she wanted him gone, but because she wanted to protect him. Protect herself. Protect the baby from becoming a headline. Noah read her silence anyway. His voice dropped. "You're trying to solve this like a business problem." Ava's eyes hardened. "It is a business problem," she said. Noah's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes cooled. "It's not," he said. "It's a human problem that your business is going to exploit." The words landed like a slap. Ava stood abruptly. "Watch your tone." Noah's gaze stayed steady. "I'm not trying to disrespect you." Ava's chest tightened. She hated the argument. Hated that she was suddenly in unfamiliar territory. She could handle hostile negotiations, but she didn't know how to handle someone who cared about her and was willing to push back. She turned away, staring out the window. The city looked sharp and distant. "I can't lose this company," she said quietly. Noah's voice softened slightly. "You won't." Ava laughed once, short and humorless. "You don't know that," she said. "You don't know what it's like to have everything you built balanced on perception." Noah was silent for a moment. Then he said, "I know what it's like to have everything you built balanced on someone else's heartbeat." Ava froze. The words hit her harder than anything else he'd said. She turned back toward him. Noah looked tired, not angry, just worn down by the weight of having to defend something that shouldn't have needed defending. Ava's throat tightened. She swallowed hard. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. The apology felt strange in her mouth. Noah blinked once, surprised. Ava exhaled. "I'm scared," she admitted. Noah's expression shifted again, the hardness fading. "I know," he said. Ava sat back down slowly. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Noah said, "I told my sister." Ava's head snapped up. "What?" she asked sharply. Noah held up his hands slightly, calming. "Not everything. Just that. I might be having another child." Ava's stomach tightened again, this time from something closer to panic. "Noah," she said, voice low. "Why would you do that?" He didn't flinch. "Because I needed someone to know," he said. "Because I'm not as good as you at carrying things alone." Ava stared at him. The words weren't an excuse, they were honest, and she realized suddenly how unfair it was to expect him to keep this locked inside while she was still trying to decide what parts of herself could exist publicly. Noah continued, quieter. "She asked who the mother was. I didn't tell her, but she figured it out anyway." Ava's blood ran cold. Noah's eyes stayed on hers. "She's not going to tell anyone," he said. "She's not like that. But, Ava, this isn't going to stay contained." Ava's throat tightened. She felt the edges of something dangerous, loss of control, collapse, exposure. She pressed her fingers to her temple, trying to think. "Okay," she said finally. Noah's brows knit slightly. "Okay." Ava nodded once, slowly. "We stop hiding," she said. The words came out before she fully understood them. Noah stared at her. Ava's voice steadied, like something in her had locked into place. "We do this properly," she said. "We disclose to legal. We restructure reporting. We make it impossible for anyone to claim impropriety." Noah's expression was cautious. "And the board?" Ava's jaw tightened. "I'll handle the board," she said. Noah watched her carefully. "You sure?" he asked. Ava held his gaze. She wasn't sure. Not at all. But she knew something else. If she kept running from this, it would destroy her anyway. Not publicly, internally. She had spent her entire life avoiding vulnerability. Now she was carrying it. And she couldn't keep pretending she wasn't. "I'm sure," she said. Noah's face softened. He nodded once. "Then I'm with you," he said. Ava's throat tightened again. She looked away quickly, pretending to check her calendar on her laptop. But her vision blurred slightly. Not from tears, from the strange, unfamiliar feeling of being supported. Outside her office, the building continued to hum with normal workday sounds. Phones ringing, footsteps, conversations. Inside, Ava felt the ground shift under her in a way she couldn't stop. And for the first time, she didn't try to stop it. She scheduled the meeting with legal for the next morning. Not as a request, as a directive. By the time she walked into the general counsel's office, her decision had hardened into something almost physical. Like armor, she didn't know if it would protect her, but she needed something between herself and what was coming. The general counsel, Martin, stood when she entered. He was a careful man, always polite, always watchful. The kind of person who smiled with his mouth but not his eyes. "Ava," he said, "have a seat." She sat. Noah wasn't there. That was intentional. Ava wanted this handled without emotion in the room. She didn't want Martin reading Noah's face, searching for weakness. Martin folded his hands on the desk. "You asked for this meeting urgently," he said. Ava nodded once. Then she said it. "No lead-in. I'm pregnant. The father is an employee." Martin didn't react immediately. But she saw it, the shift in his posture. The way his eyes narrowed slightly, not in judgment, but calculation. "How long have you known?" he asked. "A week," Ava said. "And the relationship?" Martin's tone stayed neutral, but the question wasn't. "There is no ongoing relationship in the workplace," Ava replied. "But yes, there is a personal relationship." Martin's gaze held hers. Was this consensual? Ava's jaw tightened. "Yes," she said, voice flat. Martin nodded slowly, as if ticking off boxes. "And the employee's name?" Ava hesitated for half a second. Not because she was unsure, because saying it out loud felt like turning Noah into a case file. "Noah Bennett," she said. Martin leaned back in his chair, eyes still on her. "The optics are serious," he said. Ava's mouth tightened. "I know." Martin picked up a pen, turned it in his fingers. "You understand that failure to disclose a conflict of interest can be interpreted as misconduct," he continued. Ava didn't blink. "That's why I'm here." Martin's eyes narrowed slightly again. He seemed almost disappointed she had come voluntarily, like he'd been hoping for leverage. "What outcome are you expecting?" he asked. Ava spoke clearly. "We restructure his reporting line immediately. He's moved out of any chain of command connected to me. We document everything. We inform HR. We prepare a statement for the board." Martin's brows lifted. "A statement?" Ava's voice stayed calm. "They'll find out anyway. I won't be cornered." Martin watched her for a moment. Then he nodded. "I'll draft the compliance report," he said. "But you should understand, this will not stay contained to internal channels. If there's even a hint of favoritism, someone will leak it." Ava leaned forward slightly. "Then we make sure there's no favoritism," she said. Martin's lips pressed together. "That will be difficult." Ava's eyes hardened. "Nothing about this is going to be easy." Martin paused. Then, carefully, "Are you planning to keep the child?" The question was too personal coming from him. Ava felt it immediately. The intrusion. The way his tone tried to sound neutral while reaching for something else. "Yes," she said. Martin nodded slowly again. His pen stopped moving. "In that case," he said, "you need to consider succession planning, temporary leadership coverage, public relations strategy." Ava's throat tightened. She had expected the board to bring up those topics eventually. Hearing it now in this sterile office made it feel like a threat. "I'm not stepping down," she said. Martin's gaze remained steady. "I didn't say you were. But pregnancy is a liability in the eyes of people who don't respect women." Ava's mouth tightened. "I'm aware," she said. Martin opened a folder on his desk and slid a sheet of paper toward her. "This is our conflict disclosure policy," he said. "You'll need to sign acknowledgement. HR will initiate an internal review." Ava looked at the paper. Her signature. Her name. She had signed deals worth billions. She had signed termination letters. She had signed acquisition approvals that erased companies overnight. This signature felt heavier than all of them. She picked up the pen and signed anyway. When she stood to leave, Martin spoke again. "One more thing," he said. Ava paused at the door. "If this becomes public," Martin continued, "the company will protect itself first. I need you to understand that." Ava stared at him for a long moment. "I already understand that," she said quietly. Then she left. Back in her office, she shut the door and leaned against it for a second, breathing slowly. She felt strange. Not regret. Not shame. Something closer to resignation. Like she had just walked into a storm on purpose. Her phone buzzed. "Noah, how did it go?" Ava stared at the screen, thumb hovering. She typed, "We're restructuring your reporting line. HR review starts today. The board will know soon." Noah's reply came quickly. "Okay, I'm ready." Ava read it twice. She didn't believe him. Not fully. But she wanted to. That afternoon, HR called Noah into a meeting. Ava didn't attend. She stayed in her office, working through a stack of documents she didn't actually need to review, just to keep her hands busy. At 4:30, Martin came in. He closed the door behind him. "The HR director is asking questions," he said. Ava didn't look up. "That's her job." Martin hesitated. "She wants to know if the relationship began before or after he reported to you." Ava's jaw tightened. "It began after," she said. Martin nodded. "And she wants to know if you've ever influenced his performance reviews." Ava's eyes lifted sharply. "No," she said. "Never." Martin watched her. "You understand why she's asking?" Ava leaned back in her chair. "She's asking because she wants to know if I'm corrupt," Ava said. Martin didn't deny it. He only said, "We'll handle it." After he left, Ava sat still for a long time. Her hands rested on her desk. Her fingers were tense. She realized something then. She had always believed the hardest part of leadership was making decisions. But this wasn't about decisions. This was about being judged, being measured against rules written by people who never had to live inside her body. Her phone buzzed again. A message from her board chair. Need to see you tonight. 8. My office. Ava stared at it. Her stomach tightened. This was it. The beginning of the board's reaction. The moment the company stopped being a structure she controlled and became a force she had to survive. She typed back, "I'll be there." At 7:55, she walked into the board chair's office. He was already seated behind his desk, hands folded. He looked calm. Too calm. "Ava," he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. She sat. He studied her for a long moment before speaking. "Martin informed me," he said. Ava nodded once. "Yes." The board chair leaned forward slightly. "This is a serious situation," he said. Ava's voice stayed even. "I'm aware." The board chair's expression tightened. "How could you allow this?" The words were sharp. Judgment disguised as concern. Ava didn't flinch. "It wasn't calculated," she said. "It happened." The board chair exhaled through his nose like he was trying not to show frustration. "You understand the liability," he said. "Yes. And you understand the reputational damage," he continued. Ava's eyes held his. "Yes." The board chair's voice hardened. "Then why are you keeping the baby?" Ava's breath caught slightly. The question wasn't his to ask, but she expected it anyway. She stared at him for a moment, then spoke. "Because it's mine," she said, "and I'm not going to erase my life to make shareholders comfortable." The board chair's eyes narrowed. "That's a very emotional answer," he said. Ava's mouth tightened. "No," she replied. "It's a practical one. I can lead this company while pregnant. If the board believes otherwise, that's not a business concern. That's prejudice." The board chair leaned back slowly. For a moment, Ava saw something in his expression: surprise, maybe even respect. But it didn't last. He steepled his fingers. "You've made enemies," he said quietly. "Competitors, investors, even some members of this board. They will use this against you." Ava's jaw tightened. "Let them try," she said. The board chair watched her. "You're taking a hard line," he said. Ava's voice was calm, but there was steel in it. "I've been taking a hard line my entire career," she replied. "That's why we're profitable." Silence. Then the board chair spoke again, slower. "And the employee?" he asked. Ava felt the protective instinct rise immediately. "He is not the problem," she said. The board chair's gaze sharpened. "He's part of the liability." Ava's voice dropped. "If you punish him, you're admitting this company treats women's personal lives as scandal," she said. "And you're admitting the board would rather destroy a talented engineer than handle an inconvenient reality." The board chair stared at her for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. "You're bold," he said. Ava didn't respond. He continued, quieter. "Fine. We'll restructure. We'll contain it as long as we can. But Ava, you need to understand, if this goes public, the press will not treat you fairly." Ava's mouth tightened. "They never have," she said. The board chair sighed. "You can leave," he said. Ava stood. Before she reached the door, he spoke again. "One more thing." Ava paused. "If this turns into a distraction," he said, "the board will demand a temporary replacement." Ava turned back slowly. Her eyes were cold. "If you try," she said quietly, "you'll lose me entirely." The board chair blinked. Ava didn't wait for a response. She left. Outside his office, the hallway was empty. The building was quiet. Ava walked to the elevator and pressed the button. Her hands were shaking slightly. Not from fear, from rage, from the realization that she could do everything right, build everything perfectly, and still be treated like her body was a weakness. The elevator doors opened. As she stepped inside, her phone buzzed. A message from Noah. "How are you holding up?" Ava stared at the screen. She didn't type immediately. Then she wrote, "I'm fine, but they're going to come for us." A pause. Then Noah replied, "Then we stand." Ava read the words. She felt something shift in her chest. Not comfort. Something harder. Something like resolve. The leak didn't come from HR. It didn't come from the board either. It came from someone lower. Someone who wanted attention. On Thursday morning, a tech blog posted a vague article about ethical concerns inside the company's leadership. No names, no confirmation. Just enough detail to make people curious. By noon, internal Slack channels were louder than usual. Conversations slowed when she walked past. Notifications stacked up faster than they should have. Ava didn't panic. She went to her office, closed the door, and called Martin. "How contained is this?" she asked. "Not very," he said. The journalist reached out for comment. Ava looked out the window at the city, gray and indifferent. "Do we deny?" he asked. Ava didn't answer immediately. Denial would buy time. It always did. But time for what? For her body to start showing? For speculation to grow teeth? "No," she said finally. "We confirm." Martin was quiet for a second. "You're sure?" "Yes." There was a pause. "All right," he said. "Then we control the narrative." Ava ended the call and sat very still. Her heart was beating hard but steady. She noticed it, a physical rhythm, like the one she'd heard in that dim exam room days ago. 2 heartbeats now, both loud. Her assistant knocked gently and stepped inside. "The communications team is asking for direction," she said carefully. Ava nodded. "Schedule a company-wide meeting at 4, in person, and send a press statement draft to my inbox." The assistant hesitated. "Are you okay?" Ava met her eyes. "Yes," she said. It wasn't entirely true, but it wasn't entirely false either. By 4 o'clock, the auditorium was full. Ava stood backstage for a moment before walking out. She could hear the low hum of conversation through the curtain. Curiosity, tension, judgment. She smoothed her jacket and stepped forward. The room went quiet. Hundreds of faces looked up at her. She had spoken in this space dozens of times. Quarterly updates, product launches, strategic pivots. Today felt different. She didn't use slides. She didn't use notes. She stepped to the center of the stage and let the silence settle. "There's speculation circulating," she began, voice steady. "I'm not going to pretend it doesn't exist." A ripple moved through the room. "I am pregnant," she said plainly. "The father is an employee. We have disclosed the relationship to legal. Reporting lines have been restructured. There has been no favoritism. There will be no favoritism." The room stayed quiet, too quiet. Ava continued. "I understand that some of you may have concerns about professionalism, about leadership, about the company's image." She paused. "I will continue to lead this company. My personal life does not diminish my ability to do my job." Her hands were steady at her sides. "If anyone believes otherwise," she added, voice slightly sharper, "you are free to raise that concern directly." She didn't smile. She didn't soften it. She let the weight of it hang. A hand went up in the middle rows. A junior analyst. Ava nodded. "Will this affect expansion plans?" the analyst asked, voice thin but brave. Ava felt something unexpected, respect. "No," she said. "Expansion plans are based on market conditions, not my medical status." A few scattered nods. Another hand. "What about company culture?" someone asked. "Isn't this complicated?" Ava held the person's gaze. "Culture isn't built on pretending people don't have lives," she said. "It's built on how we handle reality when it's uncomfortable." The room went still again. No more hands went up. Ava scanned the audience briefly. Then she said, "If there are no further questions, I expect everyone back at work." A faint ripple of nervous laughter. She stepped off the stage without waiting for applause. Backstage, her legs felt weaker than she wanted to admit. She steadied herself against the wall for a second. Noah was there. He hadn't told her he would be. He stood a few feet away, not approaching until she looked at him. "You didn't have to do that alone," he said quietly. Ava exhaled slowly. "I did," she replied. Noah nodded. "You were good," he said. Ava's mouth tightened slightly. "That's not what this is about." Noah studied her. "Then what is it about?" he asked. Ava looked down at her hands. They were trembling now. Not violently, just enough. She hadn't noticed it on stage. "It's about not letting them turn this into something dirty," she said. Noah stepped closer. "It isn't," he said. Ava looked up at him sharply. "They will try," she replied. Noah's gaze stayed steady. "Then we don't let them," he said. The simplicity of it made her want to laugh and cry at the same time. Instead, she said nothing. That night, the press statement went live. Clear, direct, no apology. By morning, headlines had names attached. CEO announces pregnancy with employee. Power dynamics questioned. Corporate ethics or personal choice. Ava read every article, not because she wanted to, because she refused to be blindsided. Some were neutral, some were sharp, a few were ugly. She expected that. What she didn't expect was the email from a female founder she barely knew. "Thank you for not hiding." Ava stared at the message for a long time. There were more like it throughout the day. Quiet support. Not loud. Not performative. But present. In the afternoon, the board chair called again. "You stabilized the internal reaction," he admitted. Ava leaned back in her chair. "I told you I would," she said. There was a pause. "The stock dipped," he continued, "but it's recovering." Ava closed her eyes briefly. "And?" she asked. "And," he said, voice slower now, "you may have underestimated how many people respect you for this." Ava didn't respond. She wasn't doing this for respect. She was doing it because she couldn't live with herself otherwise. When she hung up, she sat in silence. Her phone buzzed again. Noah. Ethan saw a headline. Ava's breath caught. "And," she typed. There was a pause before his reply. "He asked if the baby is going to live with us." Ava's heart thudded hard. "What did you say?" Another pause. "I said yes." Ava stared at the screen. Her chest felt tight. Not from fear. From the sudden image of a small boy trying to imagine a future that now included her. She typed slowly. "Is he okay?" The reply came quickly. He asked if he liked dinosaurs. Ava blinked. Of all the questions, "What did you say?" she wrote. "I said I don't know yet." Ava felt something shift in her chest, a warmth she hadn't prepared for. She typed back, "Tell him I prefer the ones that don't go extinct." A moment passed. Then Noah responded with a single word. "Noted." Ava sat back in her chair. She looked down at her hands resting lightly against her stomach. The world hadn't collapsed. It hadn't embraced her either. It had reacted, judged, adjusted. And she was still standing, but something inside her was different. She wasn't fighting to preserve an image anymore. She was protecting something smaller, more fragile, more permanent. And for the first time in her life, the thought of being seen as human didn't feel like defeat. It felt like weight. Real weight. The kind you carry because you choose to. The second trimester came quietly. No dramatic shift, no sudden peace. Just a slow, steady change that Ava didn't fully notice until she caught herself one morning standing in front of her bathroom mirror, staring at her stomach with a kind of disbelief. Not pride, not joy, more like recognition, like she was meeting someone she hadn't expected to become. She buttoned her blouse and left for work anyway. The office had adjusted. People still whispered, but the whispers were different now. Less scandal, more curiosity. Some resentment, some admiration, mostly uncertainty. Ava had learned to live inside uncertainty. What she hadn't learned was how to live inside people's expectations. They watched her constantly. The way she walked, the way she sat, whether she drank coffee, whether she smiled. She didn't, not often, but she noticed the way people seemed disappointed when she didn't soften, like pregnancy was supposed to turn her into someone more agreeable. She refused. In meetings, she was the same, sharp, focused, demanding, but she couldn't deny the ways her body forced her to change. She started leaving earlier, not because she wanted to, because by late afternoon her energy drained in a way she couldn't fight through. She started eating real meals, not protein bars at her desk, actual food. And she started sleeping. Not always, but more than before. The biggest change, though, wasn't physical. It was Noah. He wasn't in her orbit constantly, but he was there in small, consistent ways, a message reminding her to take her prenatal vitamins, a quiet check-in after difficult board meetings, an umbrella handed to her without comment on rainy mornings. It wasn't romantic, not in the way people would have expected. There were no dramatic gestures, no public displays. But it was intimate, because it was steady. One Friday evening, she found herself standing in the lobby, waiting. She wasn't sure why she was waiting. She told herself it was because Noah had texted that he was running late, and she needed to confirm something about a product update. That was the lie she used. Noah stepped out of the elevator 10 minutes later. He looked tired, his hair slightly disheveled, sleeves rolled up. When he saw her, his expression softened. "You didn't have to wait," he said. Ava shrugged. "I was still working." Noah's eyes flicked over her. She was wearing a loose black dress now, instead of the fitted suit she used to favor. Her stomach was visible beneath the fabric. He looked at it for a second longer than usual. Ava noticed. "You can stop acting like it's fragile glass," she said quietly. Noah blinked. Then he gave a small, almost reluctant smile. "I'm not acting," he said. "I just still can't believe it." Ava didn't answer, because she couldn't either. They walked outside together. Noah's car was parked across the street. Ava's driver waited in hers. She dismissed him without explanation. Noah looked at her as she crossed toward his car. "You're sure?" he asked. Ava nodded. The city air was cold again, winter pressing in. When they got into the car, Ava immediately noticed the booster seat still in the back. But now there was something else too. A small stuffed dinosaur sitting beside it. Its fabric was worn, one eye slightly crooked. Ava stared at it. Noah followed her gaze. "Ethan wanted it to come," he said. Ava's throat tightened. "Why?" she asked. Noah shrugged, one hand on the steering wheel. "He said the baby should get used to it," he replied. Ava looked away quickly, out the window. The idea of a child preparing her unborn baby for the world felt too strange, too tender. It made her chest hurt. Noah drove toward his house without asking where she wanted to go. Ava realized she had already agreed. Noah lived in a small home on the edge of the city. Not flashy. Not the kind of place she'd ever looked at when she was buying property. The yard was modest. The porch light was warm. When they stepped inside, Ava froze for a moment. The air smelled like food. Real food. Something baked. Something sweet. It wasn't clean in the way her apartment was clean. There were shoes by the door, a backpack tossed over a chair, a small pile of mail on the kitchen counter. It looked lived in. It looked like someone had a life here. Noah shrugged off his coat. "My sister's watching Ethan for a couple hours," he said. "He'll be back later." Ava nodded, her eyes still moving across the room. Photos on the wall. A picture of Ethan smiling with missing teeth. A photo of Noah with a woman Ava recognized immediately without ever having met her. His wife. The woman's face was open, soft. Her hand rested on Noah's shoulder in the picture, like she belonged there. Ava stared at the photo longer than she meant to. Noah noticed. He didn't rush to cover it or apologize. "That was Claire," he said quietly. Ava swallowed. "She looks kind," Ava said. Noah nodded. His expression didn't change, but his eyes darkened slightly. She was, he said. Ava didn't know what else to say. The room felt heavy with someone else's history. Noah walked into the kitchen and pulled something from the oven. The smell filled the house, warm cinnamon, butter. Ava watched him move around the kitchen with practiced ease. Like this was normal for him, like he hadn't spent years alone just surviving. He set a plate down on the table. "Sit," he said. Ava hesitated. Then she sat. Noah poured her tea. Not coffee, tea. Ava stared at the cup. He slid the plate toward her. A slice of something homemade. "I'm not hungry," she started. Noah didn't look up. "Eat anyway." Ava almost argued. Then she stopped. She took a small bite. The taste was warm and sweet, and unfamiliar in a way that made her eyes sting. Noah sat across from her, watching quietly. Ava swallowed. "This is good," she said. Noah nodded. "Ethan likes it." Ava took another bite. The silence between them was different here, softer, less guarded. Ava's eyes drifted back to the photo on the wall. "You still love her," she said. Not as a question. Noah's hands stilled slightly on the table. "Yes," he said. The answer was immediate, honest. Ava didn't flinch. She expected to feel jealousy. She expected to feel threatened. Instead, she felt something else. Respect. Because he wasn't pretending she had replaced anyone. He wasn't trying to rewrite his past to make her feel secure. He was telling the truth. Ava nodded slowly. Noah's gaze stayed on her. "It doesn't mean I can't care about you," he said quietly. Ava's chest tightened. She set her fork down. "You don't have to say things like that," she replied. Noah's expression was calm. "I know," he said, "but I want to." Ava looked away again. Her hands rested on her stomach, fingers spread. She could feel a faint movement now sometimes. Not consistent, not dramatic, just a subtle flutter that made her freeze every time. Like a reminder. No one noticed her hand. "Did you feel something?" he asked. Ava hesitated. Then she nodded. Noah stood up slowly, as if he didn't want to scare her. He walked around the table and knelt beside her chair. Ava's breath caught. "Noah, just tell me if you don't want it," he said. Ava stared at him. Then, after a long moment, she said quietly, "You can." Noah's hand hovered over her stomach. Then he placed it there gently. Ava felt the warmth of his palm through the fabric of her dress. They both went still. The house was silent except for the faint ticking of a clock somewhere in the hallway. And then, another flutter. Noah's eyes widened. His breath left him in a sound that wasn't quite a laugh and wasn't quite a sob. He kept his hand there, frozen. Ava watched his face. For the first time since she'd known him, she saw him look completely unguarded. Not like an employee, not like a widower, just like a man realizing something impossible was real. Noah's voice came out barely above a whisper. "Hi," he said. Ava's throat tightened so hard she couldn't speak. She didn't cry. She just sat there, watching him, feeling his hand on her stomach, and realizing that this wasn't about scandal anymore. It wasn't even about the company. It was about the fact that life had found its way into them both again, and neither of them had been ready. Ethan came home 20 minutes later. Ava heard the front door open, the quick drop of a backpack hitting the floor, the sound of small shoes scraping against wood. Her spine straightened automatically. Noah stood, giving her a quick look that said more than words could. "You can leave if you want." He didn't say it out loud. He didn't need to. Ava stayed seated. Ethan's voice carried from the hallway. "Dad? In here," Noah called back. Ava felt something shift inside her chest. Not fear. Something closer to anticipation, sharp and unfamiliar. Ethan stepped into the kitchen and stopped. He was smaller than she imagined. Thin arms, big eyes. His hair slightly messy like he'd been running around. He looked at Ava, then at her stomach, then back at her face. Noah crouched beside him. "Ethan," he said gently, "this is Ava." Ethan nodded once. "Serious. You're the baby's mom," he said. Ava blinked. "Yes," she replied. Her voice sounded steadier than she felt. Ethan studied her a moment longer. "Do you like dinosaurs?" he asked. Noah exhaled softly, almost laughing. Ava's mouth twitched. "I've been informed I need to start," she said. Ethan considered that carefully. "Okay," he said. He walked closer. Ava didn't move. Ethan stood directly in front of her and looked at her stomach again. Not embarrassed, not shy, just curious. "Is it a boy or a girl?" he asked. "We don't know yet," Ava answered. Ethan nodded slowly. "I hope it's a girl," he said, "because then I can teach her things." Ava felt her throat tighten. "What kind of things?" she asked quietly. "How to build stuff," Ethan said, "and how to not be scared at night." Ava's eyes flicked to Noah. Noah's face was still, but something in his eyes shifted. Ethan reached out hesitantly and touched her stomach with one finger, very lightly, as if he expected it to move. "Hi," he said softly. Ava felt the flutter again. Small, almost nothing. But she felt it. And she felt something else too. A crack. Not in her strength, in her distance. She had spent her whole life maintaining distance. From vulnerability, from attachment, from anything that might require more than she could control. Now a child was standing in front of her, assuming she belonged here. Like it was simple. Noah stood and rested a hand gently on Ethan's shoulder. "Give her space," he murmured. Ethan stepped back immediately. Ava surprised herself. "It's okay," she said. Her voice wasn't sharp. It wasn't rehearsed. It was gentle. They stayed for dinner. Nothing formal. Just simple food. Noah reheated while Ethan talked about school and a spelling test he almost passed. Ava listened. She didn't try to impress him. She didn't try to shape herself into something softer. She just listened. At one point, Ethan asked her what she did for work. "I run a company," she said. Ethan frowned slightly. "Like a lemonade stand?" he asked. Noah smiled faintly. "Bigger," he said. Ethan looked back at Ava. "Do you like it?" he asked. The question landed heavier than it should have. Ava paused. She thought about boardrooms and headlines and pressure that never stopped. "Yes," she said finally. "I do." Ethan nodded as if that settled it. After dinner, Noah walked Ava to the door. Ethan stayed at the table drawing something with colored pencils. At the doorway, Ava paused. Noah watched her carefully. "You didn't have to stay," he said. "I know," she replied. Silence stretched. Ava looked back toward the kitchen. Ethan was still drawing, tongue slightly out in concentration. "He's steady," she said quietly. Noah nodded. He had to be. Ava felt that sentence settle somewhere deep. She looked at Noah. "I don't know how to do this," she admitted. Noah didn't smile. "Neither do I," he said. Ava let out a slow breath. "I'm not good at needing people," she said. Noah's expression softened slightly. "Then don't think of it as needing," he replied. "Think of it as choosing." Ava held his gaze. Choosing. She had always chosen power, control, distance. Now she was choosing something that could undo her. And she wasn't stepping back. She nodded once. "I'll see you Monday," she said. Noah's mouth twitched slightly. "You'll see me tomorrow," he said. "You have that investor lunch." Ava blinked, then exhaled a quiet breath that might have been a laugh. "Right," she said. She stepped outside. The air was colder now. Night fully settled. As she walked toward her car, she felt the weight of the day settle into her bones. Not exhaustion, not regret. Weight. The kind that anchors you instead of dragging you under. Over the next months, things shifted. The headlines faded. The stock stabilized. The board stopped circling her like a threat. There were still whispers. There would always be whispers, but they grew quieter. Ava kept working. She stood on the stage in Berlin, visibly pregnant, and delivered her keynote without apology. Cameras flashed. Questions came. She answered them without flinching. She did not shrink. She did not overcompensate. She simply existed. And people adjusted. At night, though, she allowed something else. She allowed herself to sit on Noah's couch while Ethan fell asleep upstairs. She allowed herself to ask about Claire without defensiveness. She allowed herself to admit when she was tired. One evening, near the end of her pregnancy, she sat in the nursery she had reluctantly set up in her apartment. The room was smaller than her office, softer. There was a crib against the wall, a chair in the corner. She ran her hand over the crib rails slowly. She thought about the woman she had been a year ago, sharp, untouchable, certain. That woman had believed strength meant never bending. Now she understood something different. Strength wasn't about control. It was about standing still while your life changed shape around you and not running from it. Her phone buzzed. A message from Noah. Ethan wants to know if the baby will like dinosaurs. Ava stared at the screen. She typed back slowly. Tell him she already does. A moment later, another message. She? Ava rested her hand against her stomach. They had found out 2 weeks ago. A girl. She hadn't said it out loud much yet. It felt fragile. Yes, she typed. A pause. Then Noah responded. Then we're ready. Ava leaned back in the chair and closed her eyes. She could feel the baby move now. Stronger. Insistent. Alive. Her career hadn't ended. Her reputation hadn't collapsed. Some doors had closed quietly. Some opportunities had shifted, but something else had opened. Something she had never allowed herself to imagine. She wasn't less formidable. She wasn't less capable. She was just no longer pretending she was invulnerable, and that, she realized, sitting alone in a quiet nursery, was the real change. Not the company, not the headlines. Her. She had chosen honesty over fear. She had chosen to stand beside someone instead of ahead of everyone. She had chosen to carry something that would outlast her title, and for the first time in her life, the future didn't feel like a battlefield. It felt like a room she was willing to walk into without armor.